Heather was walking alone. She silently cursed herself for being in that moment, having realized with quickened steps how alone she really was. Heather had left yet another bad date. One in which the gentleman decided she appeared to have enough money to cover his tab, which had been extensive, and the tabs of his two friends he had brought. On a first date with her. Heather smiled when he explained how fantastic it had been that he was allowing her to pay for all four, not just herself. She excused herself, went to the front, paid her bill, and left without a word. That had been 2 hours ago. She just started walking, angry with herself for once more picking the biggest losers to take out. She was wondering if she were a mutant when a noise brought her back to reality. She was being followed. She ducked into a shop awning, making sure her body was hidden from the street, but she could confront whomever decided today was a good day to test her defense skills she had learned years ago. Heather did not wait long. It was her former date. He had followed her with his two friends. They stopped when they rounded to the front of the store. "There you are," he explained with false brightness. "You left without saying goodbye. After I was so nice to you too." He stepped forward, as if to grab her. Her left foot left the ground and met his face. He registered shock at first, then slumped downward as he lost consciousness. One of his friends, the one that had leered at her all night and suggested to him loudly that she would be an excellent toy, rushed forward with both hands outstretched to grab her, but she was quicker. She executed a simple maneuver that sidestepped his hands and brought her own elbow into his ribs. He lost his breath immediately, and she finished him with a blow that sent him downward to meet his friend. The final man watched with dull eyes that calculated his odds against her, finding them lacking, and ran off. Heather looked at the men. This was always the way of them. Every single time she attempted to date or find someone special in her life to fill the loneliness, they turned out like this, or worse. She was going to turn to leave when she noted another pair of eyes watching her from across the street in the alley. They were attached to a man, but Heather knew he was not a man. She had known about the things that bumped back in the night, but kept herself out of those affairs. She had her own secrets to protect. Heather inclined her head towards him. In a gesture of acknowledgement, he reciprocated. As she moved to finally leave, she heard his voice soft but unmistakable from him. "Are you finished with them?" came the question. It was laced with all things predatory and icy. She looked down at the two still forms, knowing she should claim them because what he was planning meant they would not wake up from. Heather decided. She nodded and walked away. She did not look back when she heard his almost silent gait to them with a gentle sucking sound that she did not want to investigate further. By morning, the shop owner would report the overdose of two men who were last seen having a great night at the benefit of a woman who had finally left them due to their antics. Nobody would miss them. Even the police would close the file muttering about junkies. Heather was in her small home 3 nights later when she received a knock on the door. She knew, before she opened the door, who it was. The man from the alley. He gazed upon her with those same red eyes that stared at her from across the alley. Now, they were blazing with an acute awareness of her. "May I come in?" he asked, formally. Heather leaned against the doorframe. No. She knew he could not come in without an invitation, and she did not want him in her home. He arched a single brow at her. "I could force myself in." His words were quiet and icy, but now there was a touch of humor to them. Heather smiled, showing her own canines, which caused him to step backwards. "Try vampire. See how far you'll get." As if to punctuate her words, she stepped back into her own home and waited. For a long time, what felt like hours, they simply stared at each other. Finally, he sighed and sat cross-legged on her doorstep. He looked young, maybe 25 when turned, but his mannerism and clothing put him over the fledgling mark. Heather also sighed and sat down on her side of the barrier. "What do you want?" she asked tiredly. He considered it for a moment. He picked at an invisible lint on his cashmere pants. "I wanted to understand the person who would walk away from me feeding on two people." It was not an accusation. It was stated as a matter of fact. Heather did not know how to answer him. She had not thought of it once the choice was made. Instead, she looked at him. "Why did you ask if I were finished with them?" He appeared startled by her question. To his question, he gave her a careful, almost boyish smile. "I did not know if you were going to eat them first or if I could, so I asked." It seemed polite. Heather nodded. This made sense. He knew she was not human, but not like him either. So this was the real reason for his visit. He held out his hand, then pulled it back. Another boyish grin that made his hazel blue eyes crinkle slightly in the corners. "I am Barrett, but everyone calls me Bar. Yes, I am a vampire, and we both know you are not human." His eyes still held amusement, but his voice betrayed the edge. He was nervous, Heather realized. "I'm Heather, and you are right," she answered, still watching him. He nodded again and seemed to wait. They stared at one another for almost 5 minutes. 5 minutes may not be a long time for some, but when one is an immortal vampire and the other an unknown simply staring at one another, it may as well have been 5 years. "Heather, this feels weird sitting here. Can we meet?" He paused, looking around. He stood and was gone in a blur of motion, using his vampiric speed to travel up and down her streets. He returned moments later with a massive grin. "There is a cafe 3 streets over. Can we walk there or meet up there?" He was pointing as though he were 5 and saw an elephant for the first time. Heather hid a smile. Heather stood, locked her home, and followed him down the path. He studied her, even using his sense of smell, as though her scent would give up her secret. It took them 20 minutes to arrive at the cafe, Heather intentionally not using her speed. He asked her a wide assortment of various questions on things she liked. What music made her emotional, which caused her to raise her brow at him, where she came from, favorite foods, etc. All of the questions were posed as searches to discover, but her answers frustrated him, as they were either 1 or 2 words or nothing at all. If she refused to answer a question, she would simply smile or ask him a question. Bar noted it and collected it like all other odd things about her. When they arrived at the cafe, the barista seemed to know Heather and was already preparing her order. She gave Bar a soft smile, saying she came there often. He ordered a black coffee. Heather gathered a hot green tea and a large glass of water with no ice. She moved back outside to sit in the front of the building. On her way, Heather grabbed a large salt shaker, opened the lid, and dumped the entire contents of the salt into her water. She stirred it a moment or two, then guzzled the entire drink as though hydration was a new concept. Bar's eyes widened, and his mouth slacked slightly. Heather smiled again, licking the remaining salt from the sides of the glass. Heather turned to him, giving him that grin that showed too many teeth, which caused Bar's heart to leap a bit, which for a vampire was a feat unto itself. "Barrett, I am old. I am also one of the few of my kind. I can talk to you about anything you want, other than what I am. Perhaps speak to Revna. We are, after all, cousins." She watched the color drain from his face as she mentioned the High Queen, which all members of the supernatural community knew to be the final say in all matters. "You asked about those 2 humans. I went on a date with the one thinking he was a decent man, but he was not. When you came along, I knew you needed to feed, as I have already fed." Heather finished, without a flourish, but with a shrug of her shoulders. She understood the supernatural world, as well as the humans, even though she was not part of either. They stayed for the next 3 hours, just talking about everything and nothing. She explained that she was a watcher, which is why she would never be formally part of the court or human affairs. Bar listened, as she explained that her job was to watch both worlds to ensure the balance was maintained. So last night, Bar started quietly, was actually you doing your job? Either it would be you or another of our kind to take care of them. She nodded, and he continued, I have heard of your positions. The Watchers are actually considered an honored position. Our queen must trust you. He stared at her in wonder and a bit of trepidation, because her position put her directly in the ear of the highest and most lethal member of their society. Heather was quiet for a moment. She had seen this reaction before. Bar, I am not someone who is going to make a judgment call of death to us or them without a substantial amount of evidence. Those men last night had crimes against both sides that warranted my involvement. The attempt to stick me with the bill was just the final insult. You were simply the method of justice. You needed what they offered. I could smell your need, and they were already condemned. She took a sip of her tea that was now quite cold. She absently added salt to it. Barrett watched this strange addition and wondered again what kind of creature she was. The sunset was starting when Heather looked to the distant sky. I have to head home now. I thank you for your company. She started to move toward her street when he reached out and captured her hand. Bar was startled again by the lack of warmth in her hand. Vampire hands were always cool. Not cold as many suspected, but cool, however. Heather's hands were clammy cold, as though she had been in the water for days. Heather's brown eyes were surprised at the contact, but she did not pull away. When they connected, both of them felt a jolt race up their collective limbs. You felt it, too, he whispered. Heather closed her eyes, as she already knew what that jolt was and how this may end. She wanted to tell him that there was no space for them in her life when she really looked at him. Bar was standing before her, blue-green hazel eyes filled with an emotion so raw that it hurt Heather's heart to look at him. He was gently stroking the inner part of her palm. Bar. I cannot. She gently took her hand out of his. The wounded look of rejection flicked across his eyes as he quickly looked away. When he looked back to her, his eyes held no emotion or even a suggestion of warmth. He nodded and turned, using vampiric speed to leave. Heather watched the area where his speed blurred him into something like a car, if it had been able to accelerate to over 100 miles an hour in less than a nanosecond. Barrett went to Night Keep. He stood in line with hundreds of other supernaturals, all trying to speak to the High Queen Revna. As the hours dragged by, a valet came forward to ask him what brought him before their queen. He shook his head, stating it was private for her ears only, which gave rise to eyebrows and a low whistle for another in line. He continued his vigilant waiting. It took almost 9 hours to reach Queen Revna and her consort Jaden. Queen Revna was beautiful in an ethereal way, with her honey-colored skin and long ravens-colored hair snaking in a long braid down her back. But what made the queen truly stunning was the miracle of life she carried within her very swollen body. She was almost due, which was extremely obvious with her hand resting possessively over belly. The same valet from hours ago was whispering in her ear, now pointing towards Barrett. Queen Revna signaled for him to step forward. Greeting, Bar. My valet tells me you have a private matter for me? Queen Revna's black-brown eyes never left Barrett's face. He could feel the pressure of her skimming his mind, looking for danger or even an answer. Barrett gently pushed her from his mind, causing her to grin wide. She knew now. Queen Revna stood. This caused consort Jaden to get very visibly upset, stating she should tell him if she wanted to move, that he was there to help, which she just rolled her eyes and waved him off. Instead, she held out her hand towards Barrett. He rushed forward, terrified to be this close to such a powerful vampire. Queen Revna held Barrett's hand with crushing force and used some of his height to lean on as they walked towards the gardens. As they approached a particular rose bush, the night-blooming ones that she loved, Consort Jaden rushed forward to place a string of massive pillows on the stone bench. She quickly reached up, kissed her husband, and whispered something. He left towards the kitchen, with the queen explaining that even immortal vampires have weird cravings during pregnancy. "What are you craving?" Barrett asked, before he could help himself. He knew the propriety of not asking royalty, but he could not help it. He was very curious, as the last pregnant woman he saw was his own human mother almost 200 years ago. The same pregnancy that would later end hers and his younger brother's life. "Pickles and raw liver," Queen Revna said, without fanfare. Barrett's face must have been one of pure disgust, because she laughed loudly, causing even her private security detail that was supposed to be hiding jumped in start at the sound. "I know, so gross. But this little one likes food and blood. So, I eat again. But you are not here to talk about my pregnant dietary needs." "You have something to ask me, Barrett?" she said, matter-of-factly. Queen Revna was a good queen because she remembered her people and made time for them. Barrett told her everything that had happened over the last few days. The 3 men who were going to attack the human, who eventually was drained by him after witnessing her taking them down, and her odd behavior since. He explained he knew she was his bonded mate, having mentioned the electricity, and the need in his mind and heart to see her, feel her, be with her, etc. "I am asking my liege to openly be with her." Barrett ended with his feelings laid bare. Queen Revna was silent for a while, thinking of how to describe to Barrett her joy for him that he found his one and the apprehension over the person of his affection. She started, slowly but intentionally, "I have no problems with you being with her as whatever you two label it as," she began. His expression turned to one of pure hope and joy, but she raised a hand. "And here is the but. I cannot tell you what she is, but I can tell you that she is one of my watchers. Heather is a person I would trust with the future heir, as her kind is not known for telling lies. More so, she is incapable of telling anything other than truth. I would be honored to see you two bonded." She clasped her hands together over her very swollen belly. Barrett sat back and thought of what his queen had said. She did not tell him what Heather was, just of her worth. Barrett nodded thoughtfully as the queen continued talking about Heather, that they have known each other for the better part of 500 years, that Heather was a capable watcher, always making sure her duty to the kingdom came first. Queen Revna finished by stating they had her blessing to pursue the relationship if that is what both want. Consort Jaden returned then, with 2 servants and 3 trays of food between them. Barrett's eyes grew larger, but Queen Revna just laughed again and started devouring the raw meat. Over the next 3 weeks, Barrett decided to court Heather. He sent flowers, candies, and then on the eve of the 3rd week, he sent a huge gift basket that held 5 different types of salt. Heather actually teared up a bit with the last gift, as she realized he was trying and he remembered the salt. That day, she sent a note to Queen Revna asking her to give him her phone number, to which she promptly responded already did, girly, duh. Heather texted Barrett thanking him and asking him to meet her at the wharf around midnight that night. That evening, Heather stood at the end of the main pier that led into the abyss of the Atlantic. Even though vampires had super strength, speed, and were very quiet when they moved, she could hear every step of his approach. She turned to him as he drew near, removing the only pin that held her hair up. She allowed her long black hair to whip around her body, cascading downward until it stopped by her knees. She watched as he sucked in a breath he did not need. Heather knew what she looked like right now. This was what she was. bar. Her voice lost the human simple tones to take on the harmonics of her people. I am not human. You know that. But what you do not understand, I am the last of my kind. I am a sudnado, or siren, as humans call us. Barrett stood very still watching as her eyes, normally a lovely chocolate brown that twinkled in the light, became dark like black pools of color void. On her neck, 4 vertical slats appeared on either side of her throat, but what was striking was her skin. Her skin color was that of dark coffee, but now it appeared to be a dark blue or purple that rippled with other colors, and scales were appearing on her skin. Throughout the change in her appearance, she kept her gaze steady upon him, watching all the changes that occurred in his eyes. Can you swim? She asked, then removed her robe, revealing no clothing underneath. Even with blue-green shimmering skin and scales, she was an incredibly attractive woman with all the right curves and slopes. Then, she dove into the water, making no wake or splash into the water. He quickly disrobed until he was in breeches, which caused her to tease about later and buy him modern underwear, and dove in after her. His watery entrance was loud and full of splashing. When he popped out of the water, he could not see her anywhere. He felt a small pull on an ankle. Then he dove deep. In the watery depths, Barrett used his vampiric vision to see her. She moved through the water, as though it were her natural element. He realized with a start that she was born to this world, not the other. She moved with a grace he had never seen. Even among vampires, her movements were like a choreographed ballet that only she knew all the steps in. She was also fast. Where her feet should have been, there were now long, translucent fins. There were also fins along her back, her rear, and parts of her legs. Heather moved faster than most other animals in the ocean, and Barrett found it was hard to keep up with her. Finally, they both surfaced. Barrett noted she kept her neck submerged so that she could breathe. Barrett asked in amazement, "Are your people where mermaids come from?" Yes and no. Yes, Sudantos have a long history of trying to bring sailors to the murky depths, as the story goes. And no, mermaids are actually real, but they live in very deep water. She grabbed a fish, swimming past, and ate it without preamble. Barrett was thoughtful for a moment. Is that why you did not eat those men? I did not eat those men, as I could smell your hunger. Besides, that is not how we eat. She responded to him. Heather told him what it means to be siren. It is a need for the sea, like humans need sunlight, or vampires need blood to survive. That is why she consumed salt, to equalize herself to living on land. But she had to come back to the sea at least once a week, or she would start having molting issues with her skin, hair, teeth, etc. What about your song? You keep saying your siren song, and that you didn't lead others to murky depths. Barrett prodded. Heather smiled to herself, showing off her very sharp needle teeth. Saying I can sing is like saying you're fast. Yes, I sing, but it is not what you think. And no, I do not, nor have I ever lured anyone, anywhere. But yes, historically my kind would lead humans to the water so we could feast upon them. They stayed in the water for a while longer, Heather swimming fast and further out than Barrett. They played water games she showed him from her childhood. She told him about how her people were killed one after another as humans got better at managing the sea. They were holding hands toward the end of the evening, and then he reached out and kissed her. It was not a tender kiss. It was one of need and claiming. He wrapped his entire body around hers and kissed her with everything he had. At first, Heather seemed surprised, but kissed him back with equal parts passion and need. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing heavily, even though one was in water and the other did not need to breathe, while the other did not need to actually breathe. Over the next month, Heather and Barrett's relationship grew steadily. She allowed him to come into her home as she introduced him to her longtime companion, a sea turtle named Otto. Otto communicated telepathically with Heather and then to Barrett, saying he was okay for a vampire. Heather said later out of Otto's earshot that was a high compliment from the turtle, as he was known to be rather cantankerous. On the next full moon, they were back in the ocean again when trouble began. Barrett was treading water about a mile or so from the shore when a boat approached their position. Heather showed Barrett how to hide from boats in plain sight. When they both heard screaming coming from the boat, there was a young girl, maybe 15 tops, crying and screaming for a man to leave her alone. Heather felt a cold settle around her heart as she saw the girl was injured. The injuries were obviously from this man. Heather swam up to the boat and began pulling herself aboard before Barrett could register what she was doing or even attempt to stop her. Heather was in human form again, but this time her skin did not change back to black. It stayed in that blue-green shimmer, with the addition of reddish tones that rippled through her body like a living warning. Her eyes were also now completely blacked out, with no iris or color showing. Her smile was twisted and terrible. "You like hurting children, huh?" Her words were deadly. Heather's eyes flicked to the child, softening a bit before she whispered, "Sleep," to the girl. The young girl's eyes rolled back into her head, and she crumpled to the floor. Heather knelt by her, taking her pulse and pulling a piece of fabric over her lower body. Barrett had joined the two adults now. The man was a large, portly person, with red cheeks and a blotchy nose. The smell of whiskey was strong on his breath as he cursed at both Heather and Barrett. Barrett bore his teeth at the man, causing him to back up now, showing some sense as fear welled up. What are you?" he rasped outwards, stepping back. Heather raised her hand to Barrett. "Allow me to show you why you never want to hear my song." Then she opened her mouth to sing. Barrett watched her transform from captivating and slightly dangerous beauty to a creature of unimaginable devastation. The sounds coming from her throat were not natural, and each chord struck something internal to the fat man before them. He grabbed at his head, screaming in pain. The man slammed down upon his knees, still gripping his head, as blood began to leak from his nose, ears, mouth, and finally eyes. The notes hit higher and higher until the mane made an odd curtly sound and fell forward. Barrett could tell, by not hearing the thumps of his heart, that he was dead. Heather turned and gently lifted the young girl into her arms and jumped back into the ocean. She kept the girl's head above water, but moved her through the water faster than the boat had brought her out. The girl did not stir. When they reached the shore, Heather made 2 phone calls, one to get a healer for the child and the second for the cleanup crew for the boat. When everything was handled, Heather sat down heavily. Barrett came to sit by her. "Is this why you wouldn't eat those men?" he asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded. "When I use my song, I can kill, paralyze, make someone forget or see something. Basically, I can make anyone, including vampires, do what I will them to do. But among my kind, to do that to another without cause is grounds for you to suffer the same fate. Children, however, there is never a second thought or action if they were abused." Her eyes hardened again. Barrett took her hand. "I am here, Heather, now and forever. I am here for you." He kissed the inside of her palm and held it to his face. Heather's breath caught as she realized this man was looking at her as though she hung the moon, even after seeing what her power could do. "I love you, Bar. And thank you." Her voice was soft but firm. This time, he nodded and took both of her hands as he rescinded how much he loved her too. 6 months later, Heather was in her real form, slicing through the ocean at a speed that Barrett in a small speedboat was having trouble keeping up with. They were heading out to an island off the coast, one that Queen Revna received information that Rouges were harboring children as food sources. Heather came out of the water, her form already shifting as Barrett tied off the boat. They could both hear and smell the vampires. Heather could also hear the breathing of the human children they had stolen. She looked at Barrett, who was already unsheathing a sword ready. "Remember, Revna said no mercy?" Heather said grimly, as she put her simple shift on and tied her hair back loosely. Barrett grabbed his wife and gave her a hearty kiss on the lips. "Mercy is a lovely word for what is coming for those babies in there. But the others? I'm hungry." He smiled, showing all his pointy canines. Heather returned his grin as they turned and headed towards the house. Now there were 2 watchers in the night court, and both were very good at what they did. And when one of the predators gains the upper hand, Heather and/or Barrett would simply eat their problems. They walked hand in hand to the house, Barrett already whistling a tune that Heather would metamorphosis into a killing song. She turned to look at him once last time before she opened the door, realizing that even though she was the last of her kind, she was grateful that she now had someone to help her and stand by her in the grim work ahead. Barrett understood her look and whispered back that after the snacks and the children were attended to, he would make sure she understood how much he loved and needed her. Heather smiled and went to work quickly, thrilled at the thought of her handsome husband later naked and in her bed. She was finally happy. She had found family and purpose. The rest was just the icing on her salty sea cake.